Fantastic. Hey, David, thank you for that warm introduction. And hello to everyone that is on. Good to see so many people from many different places. Before we start, I just wanted to get a few more, see where everybody else is coming in. So I did see a few come in. We got some folks from Melbourne, Minneapolis. Welcome, Raul. Um, where's everybody else from? I'm in New York City. Anybody on the East Coast? Boulder. Welcome, Delmo.
I know we have folks from New Zealand and Austin, Texas, too.
Awesome, awesome. Look at that. Marvelous. Welcome again, everybody. Thank you for taking time away from work or even before work to come into this session. Today, we'll be talking about OKRs and the Agile Mindset. And before we get into it, I have a question for everyone that I'm going to drop in the chat. And the question is, what is your experience with OKRs? And you may want to answer that question just by using a simple number here. So 1 represents you have not used OKRs and interested to learn more. 2, you're using OKRs and still learning how to increase success. 3, you are an OKR expert and you love using them. Or 4, you've used OKRs, but rather not use them again. All right, Michael, we got an expert in the room. Some 2s, 1s, 1.5. That's some 3s. Okay, a few 3s, fantastic. So no 4s. I'm glad there's no 4s. Otherwise, I would have called you out and you would have had to share why you're even here. That would have been an interesting conversation. But let me just share my screen here and get this party going. Thank you all for sharing. Damon 1 and have delved into some learning. Fantastic. Sleeping with my Measure What Matters book. Nice, Ori. That is a great book to pick up. And we can definitely share some more resources later today. Let me know if you all can see my screen here.
We can.
How does that look? Amazing. All right. My Zoom, make sure I can see some faces. All right, and then chat. Sorry, I usually use Hangouts, so this is a bit foreign, but I'm getting the hang of it. So OKRs and Agile Mindset. That's what we're here to talk about today. So we'll jump right into it. And I'll answer the question actually I put into the chat. I'm actually at a 2. I am not a OKR expert. I've been using OKRs for the last 3 years. So I introduced OKRs at a startup that I was at before I joined Xero back in November 2019. And I've been currently using them at Xero across teams and pods and also leadership teams. So let's dive right into those. So OKRs, what are those? And a lot of you may already be aware. They abbreviate objectives and key results. And that is a tool, a very simple and collaborative goal setting technique to set ambitious goals with measurable results. And there's 2 components to OKRs. There's your objective, which is pretty much sets the direction and what is to be achieved. And your objective is, or should be clear. It should be inspirational, aspirational, and qualitative. And the second part of an OKR is key results. So more than one. And those are a benchmark. Those benchmark and monitor how the objective gets achieved. So essentially they answer the question, how do we know that we've achieved the objective, or it also answers what does success look like? And key results are specific, measurable, verifiable, and quantitative. So we'll get into that a little bit as we start to dive into what those are. Before we get into a little bit about the why, let's talk a little bit about how did OKRs become so popular? So, okay, I think OKRs in this day and age are as big of a buzzword as Agile might have been a few years ago, maybe it's today. Not sure what's going on, but it all started with Peter Drucker back in the 1950s introduced this top-down management system known as MBOs, or management by objectives. And this way of management actually inspired and brought OKRs to life. So there's this guy by the name of Andy Grove who became the CEO of Intel, and he brought OKRs to life at Intel in a very eloquent way. And soon enough, there was a Intel employee by the name of John Doerr, who I think was an ex-engineer, became a VC investor and introduced OKRs to Google in 1999. So shortly after that, it was adopted by many, and some of these companies you may be familiar with. So Twitter, LinkedIn, Airbnb, and many others adopted OKRs to drive growth within their organizations. So why OKRs? Why even adopt these? Why not go with MBOs, or why not just drive with another way of working? Well, here's the thing. If OKRs are adopted effectively, they can lead to outstanding business results. And there's tons of evidence out in the market. You can look at how Intel under Andy Grove went from being a $2 billion company to being a $20 billion+ company. You can look at Google and how they went from being maybe a 30 employee company to being a 6-figure organization in just their first few years. So there's proof in the pudding where OKRs, if adopted effectively.
Not October 8, October 28. Yeah.
All right. Cool. All right, we're back. So OKRs. OKRs create focus on desired outcomes. So those key results that are quantitative, they allow you to measure outcomes, and they allow you to really measure if you've achieved certain objectives. So it really drives focus on outcomes that teams put forward. The OKRs create alignment within and across teams. So I don't know if any of you have come across a team that is just lost in the sauce and doesn't know where their team is going. OKRs can help drive clarity on where your team is going, what the intent is, and what they're looking to achieve, not only within the team, but laterally across other teams as well. They also create business value for stakeholders and customers. So anybody that's impacted by those OKRs will, and if they're used effectively, you will see some business value come out of those. OKRs, what makes OKRs different is that they're made to be transparent. So they create transparency across the organization. You shouldn't be keeping them under the rug or hidden in spreadsheets or in a PowerPoint slide. They should be made public so that every employee can access them. And the last one there is accountability. So OKRs allow teams to be empowered to drive direction in a way that aligns with the organization's mission and vision. And so in a sense, you're creating empowered teams, and ultimately that clarity creates this environment of accountability between teams, people, and leadership. All right, so I've done tons of talking about what OKRs are and why. Here are two OKRs, and you can see one with an X and one with a check. And my question for you guys here in the chat is, what do you notice about the OKR on the left versus the OKR on the right? And feel free to unmute or give us a few words in the chat.
A lot more specificity on the right versus the
Absolutely.
left. Even though they're numbers on the left, they're pretty vague and they're not really driving towards a result. It's just like counting what you're doing.
Yeah, they're more actions rather than outcomes on the left.
On the left, absolutely.
Yeah, driving to a result. I like that wording actually.
Super.
I like that the right metrics are focused on positive things. So the left one, interview 50 candidates. You can easily do that. But what you really want is the offer acceptance that you get to the hiring 10 people. So you strip that out and get to metrics that are closer to what you actually want.
Very good. Absolutely.
Just
And then
reading out some of the comments here. Left is what might need to be done, but not a goal.
Mhm.
And more measurable results on the right. The objective on the right is much more inspirational.
Super. Good one. So everybody has mentioned some really important things and observations about both of these OKRs. The one on the right does really take the shape of what an OKR should look like. And all of you have mentioned some really good things there that really truly align to what the intent is. Versus on the left, someone mentioned these are just actions, what people are going to do, and not very specific. So good observations, everyone. So let's talk a little bit about OKRs and the Agile mindset, and what does the Agile mindset have to do with it? But before we get there, let's talk about what is the Agile mindset. And there's a tool that is commonly used in the Heart of Agile community to help not only amplify the Agile culture and history, but also simplify what Agile is in the form of 4 words: collaborate, deliver, reflect, and improve. But what do you guys think? Let's talk more about what the Agile mindset is, and then we can dive into how does it tie into OKRs?
They're actually giving you a measure or an objective for that improve, little segment you've got over there. By setting that objective in your measure, that's how you know you're improving, if you're achieving that result.
Solid. And I cannot see who is talking, by the way. I can just see your.
Yeah, that was.
I can just see your face.
That
Okay.
That.
Fantastic. All right. So anything on the Agile mindset that anybody wants to share?
Another comment from the chat is getting to right versus being right.
Getting to right versus being right. Does anybody want to elaborate on that? Michael.
Sure. Hopefully you can't hear my dog in the background. That's why I'm on mute.
All good.
She's playing right now. Yeah, I mean, the idea, right, is to quickly iterate and move quickly and test yourself, test your hypotheses, and look for what actually works versus, right, a more waterfall approach of saying, like, we're going to try and figure this all out ahead of time and having very little room to change or adapt as you go forward. So, right, the idea is we have no idea what's right. We're going to figure it out quickly versus we think this is right and we're going to take a long time to deliver that.
Fantastic. Excellent, Michael. And then I see another chat in there. So Damon is dropping
And that one's an updated logo from the
Okay.
Heart of Agile. And then there was a comment of inspect and adapt.
Super. So all great things that do align. And thanks, Damon, for keeping me honest. I may be a little off brand. But essentially, I think Michael hit the nail on the head a little bit with where I was going with it, where OKRs is an agile goal setting technique. So, we think about traditional ways of setting goals, and organizations would set them annually. OKRs could be set annually, but the biggest value that I see with OKRs is setting them quarterly and doing frequent check-ins as you're working through those OKRs. So they are pretty much an agile way of setting goals. And when I think about the Heart of Agile, I think about when you think about just setting the OKRs, you've got to figure out who to collaborate with. So who are you going to bring together to try to figure out where you're going with the OKRs, and who you're going to collaborate with to set them. Then you collaborate with that core group to deliver on those OKRs quarterly. So through that quarter, you're not delivering at the end. You're working through. You're doing things to deliver on those outcomes throughout. And you, as you deliver, you collaborate to reflect. There's a portion of OKR setting and doing where you spend some time really looking at how you've set them, what you've set, and reflecting really helps to figure out what to improve on. So you're collaborating along the way, but essentially, I think this Heart of Agile model could be used to drive success with OKRs in a way that's going to help you improve using them, especially when you reflect and improve and deliberately do that to figure out how to become better with them. Any other thoughts there on just this very simple Heart of Agile model, which I do love, how simple it is and how it really just encapsulates the Agile mindset?
I'm new to Heart of Agile. I've seen the logo or like diagram before from a colleague, but not new to OKRs. Have done them a bunch of different ways. I think the piece there around deliver is very important. I've seen in an organization where OKRs can kind of fall into just a standard goal setting technique where it just has to be done at the end of the quarter and you're driving towards that date, but you're not thinking about how you're going to deliver over the course of a quarter. And so the more I think you collaborate with other people and you kind of figure out what that plan is, you're constantly making progress where you can do the other pieces of reflect and improve. I've also seen OKRs done at an individual level, and like managers kind of just default to that to get people to put something in a system. And I've always gone a little rogue and have partnered with colleagues to try to figure out like how we can at least have one OKR that's in common. So we're working on something together, especially in work that feels like very routine. I found it to be motivating. So this diagram does a good job.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Melia, did I get that right?
Yeah, that's close. Malia, but
Malia. It's not close. It's Malia. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey,
Super. Thanks for sharing that.
I just wanted to add too, I think that it's really important throughout that quarter of trying to deliver on the OKR that you're collaborating and reflecting often throughout that, because if you're not reflecting on how well you're doing as the quarter progresses, then you are going to just end up being in a scramble at the end of the quarter, or you're going to look at it and go, oh yeah, we completely forgot about that OKR, or all of those OKRs. So yeah, just that having a regular cadence for that collaboration and reflection throughout the quarter is just as important as reflecting and improving at the end of the quarter, I think.
Excellent point, David. And I think you just kicked off what I was going to talk about next. So David has just shared one gem with you all on maybe something he's learned or tried with his teams. And I'd like to take a moment to share some of the lessons learned along the way with working across 3 teams in a sub-portfolio group, as well as leadership teams when setting and working and adopting OKRs. So first and foremost there, when you start with OKRs, you will most likely fail when you first try. So what I mean by that is there's a lot of things that are going to happen that are eye-opening. And so you might not get the desired outcome that you want at first with OKRs, and that is okay. That in some ways kind of shows that the process is working if you walk into an OKR reflection session and you talk about all the things that didn't go well. And so learning from failure is key when it comes to adopting OKRs. The next thing there is if everything is a priority, nothing is. So what I've noticed with some teams that adopt OKRs is that they take on way too many. I think sometimes the idea that some teams try to go after is let's try to account for everything that we're doing in our OKRs. And I think that can lead to many anti-patterns with OKRs and might lead you to even hate OKRs when you kind of get to the end of a quarter and then realize you haven't achieved any of them. Making sure that your OKRs are capturing the most important thing for your team and organization within that quarter and that time frame is key. And the next point there lends to the top 2, but what I've noticed is that things start to fall off the rail after a team takes on more than 3 objectives in a given quarter. Oftentimes, most of them don't get achieved. So no more than 2 to 3 objectives and up to 5 key results for each objective. But then again, less is more. If your team is able to pick up one objective, one solid aspirational and inspirational objective with a few key results, then that's great because less will always be more. Writing OKRs is hard. So don't let perfection be the enemy of progression. So when I talk about writing OKRs is hard, I mean setting OKRs. So you might be in a session and with your team and you're ready to set OKRs and your team is wordsmithing OKRs and trying to make sure they come up with a magnificent objective. Sometimes the time that you spend doing that is not value add. Your team might be caught up in a hamster wheel. So it's important to kind of notice when your team is caught in that hamster wheel. Something I like to call out when teams are in the hamster wheel is I like to ask, is this OKR, is this objective or is this good key result good enough for now and safe enough to track? And I think just progression is a little bit more important than perfection here. Next point there is, let me see some comments in there. All right, cool. Next one there is, it's easy to set and forget them. So I think David spoke a little bit about reflecting throughout, but I think that frequent check-ins are key so that you can monitor how your team is getting on with the OKRs and the key results. So whether that's setting them up weekly or setting them up bi-weekly, just monitoring and checking in on your OKRs to see how you're getting on is definitely key in the process. Another one there is bringing key results into Agile planning sessions drives outcome-driven development. So when we look at OKRs and we looked at some of the KRs from an example in this presentation, those OKRs are your outcomes. And so when you bring those key results into an agile planning session, you're setting up your team to think about the outcome first before they start thinking about what to do or what user stories to work on, or what development tasks to take on in order to achieve that outcome. So always recommend keeping those OKRs top of mind by bringing them into your agile planning sessions. And the last one there is experiment and iterate your way to better use of OKRs. So and also David chimed on this as well. Reflect to understand what's working and what's not. And I'll share a little story of what it looks like to experiment and iterate your way to a better use of OKRs. So I was one time working with a team who just started using OKRs, and we were sitting in a OKR setting session, and we aimed to set 3 objectives and key results. The team in that first session we all decided and agreed upon to set the objectives first. So we're going to set the objectives for each set of the OKRs, and then we'll come back and then create the key results. What we learned by doing that, shortly after the OKR setting session, is that there was a lot of context switching. So some of the folks in the room were having a hard time trying to remember what the intent of the objective was when we got to it. And that's because we were going from one objective to the next objective to the next. What we decided to do was we learned from that. We learned from the pain of doing that. And we decided to slice OKRs by focusing on one objective and then focusing on the key results and then moving on to the next one. And that really worked well for us because and it actually was an agile approach to creating the OKRs, because we actually ran out of time. So we only had 2 hours to set the next set of OKRs, but we felt really good after a 2-hour session of setting 2 OKRs and then having to know that we need to set one more set of OKRs versus going into the session, setting 3 objectives, and then it being half-baked. Kind of seems to me like a waterfall approach. You won't get any values by just having objectives out there. So that's just one lesson and one experience I wanted to share with you all, from how you can experiment and iterate your way to using OKRs in a much better fashion. And that's the end of my presentation here. I really wanted to open the floor for some questions and perhaps some stories. And David, I think this is the part where we get to do an activity here and break up everyone.
Yes, we are going to do some breakout rooms. So I've got the breakout rooms set up. There should be 3 to 4 people per breakout room. And what we'd like you to do is share a little bit of your experience with OKRs. It could be a success story or it could be a story of challenge, but talk about them amongst yourselves. And then when we come back, we want to have some group sharing of some of the most interesting stories from your group. Ademar, back over to you if you want to facilitate the share back.
Yeah, sure. So let's open up the floor and let's bring some of those stories into this room. And if anybody wants to unmute and maybe share a story or something that really stood out to them that were discussed in the breakout rooms.
Yeah, I'll share first, Ademar. I was very privileged to be in the breakout room with Michael, and it was just the 2 of us. So I felt like I had a really good solid 10-minute session. But I was just going to share the example Michael gave around, they'd set it in the organization he worked with, they'd set an objective around getting more people to sign up for certification, and they'd done it around creating webinars and online content. And those webinars and online content was great. He said it's very successful. They got lots of good feedback, but they found it didn't actually increase the amount of people doing certification because the people attending all those webinars, ironically, had done the certification. So then we had a bit of a good conversation around, hey, at least by setting that objective and that measure, at least you're getting some feedback and you're knowing what to do next, even if you're maybe not quite getting the result you had set against your objective.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting story, Peter. Is that your current organization or previous one?
That was previous. Oh, sorry, Michael. Previous one. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for sharing, Peter. Anybody else want to share a story?
Well,
or maybe a question? Yeah. Go on.
Ironically, I was just about to come off of mute and share Peter's stories. So, no, I just thought he had a great story himself around an OKR with an insurance app, and right, they were hoping for this positive outcome, and they actually, when they went and measured it, they saw a negative outcome. So it's the exact opposite of what they expected to see. But that that's such a valuable thing, right? They had an assumption that this was going to be a valuable thing, and it wasn't. And then they were able to adapt and find a way to actually reach their objective, because it clearly wasn't the right first choice. So.
Super. That does happen sometimes. You do figure out that you've gone down the wrong path, and so that's the beauty of reflecting and figuring out where to go. Thanks for sharing, Michael. Anybody else have any stories or maybe questions? Maybe there's some questions from the presentation or questions that spurred out of the breakout rooms.
From breakout room 3, we had a couple of takeaways. One being that top level leadership support is and top down support is completely required for OKRs, because you need every team to align their OKRs. And you can also get pushback. So one person on our team had said, the top-down leadership had said, that's a team responsibility, that's your Scrum Master's job, but then they would hold the team accountable for not reaching their results without getting that support. And also the team had such a bad experience with it, then when they tried to reintroduce OKRs, they shivered at the word and had to rebrand it to shared goals just to get over that resistance. So there could be a stigma, just like with Agile and Scrum. I'm sure you guys have seen that before with quote unquote transformations.
Yeah, absolutely, Alex. And question, thanks for sharing that story. Actually, did the organization ever come back to OKRs, or did they just call them shared goals?
So it sounds like they're still in shared goals. I'll let the person whose organization that is speak up if they want, but I think they're still in the midst of it.
Cool. Thanks, Alex. And that was breakout 3. What about breakout 5? Any stories from breakout 5?
Yeah, sure. This is Lori. So I know we started out talking a little bit about how it's hard to kind of get a focus or really hone in on what objectives you're working towards. We can't just come out and say, oh, we're going to do objectives for the entire organization or the whole company, or next quarter for everyone. It helps if you can start a little bit smaller than that. So that you do have a focus or a target to shoot for your objectives. So one way that I've done this is I kind of have this thought that, we use the SAFE framework, Scaled Agile for Enterprise, and every PI or every quarter we come up with PI objectives, which is a great candidate for actually using OKRs instead of that. And the other ceremony we had was a problem-solving workshop. So we do this inspect and adapt. People come back and say, hey, here's the top couple of things that we just can't live with anymore. We have to do something about these things. So instead of doing fishbone diagram or something like that, I took it into an OKR and said, okay, all you people on this train who are, involved with this problem, let's talk about what are we doing now? What's happening now? What solutions do we have in place? Where are those failing us? And not going into the how we're going to do that, but more about what are we trying to achieve? Like, what are we trying to solve? And how we're going to know that we solved it if we, have these key results. And then the best part was that we broke out into teams and people took initiatives. They took owned an initiative, got some folks together that they felt that could help them to achieve those objectives. And so we had this more accountability, where before the problem solving workshop, an RTE would walk away or an engineering manager would walk away and say, oh, I'll do that, I'll work on it. And it would just fall into the black hole. So now we have people that are saying, no, this is our initiative. And, these are the things we're doing to progress with that. We don't have timeframes on them because, could be a whole quarter. Could be we just get started on some things and then we gauge our success after that. So that was my story, and just kind of like a piece of maybe you can adapt this into something that people are more familiar with, so it's not quite so scary and new.
Awesome story and feedback, Lori. Thank you so much. Any other breakout rooms? So we got 5, 4. Any stories from breakout? I think we captured 3 as well. Any stories from breakout room 2?
Ginny and I had a really great conversation about Xero and how we love Xero. And we're just in the confusion state with OKRs, and really hoping that David could find the OKR training I did when I was at Xero and forward it to me, because I could really use it now. That's where we got to.
I'll see what I can do, Trudy.
Thanks.
Glad y'all both got to catch up and talk about Xero. Cool. Thank you so much. Yep.
I'm curious, just from an experience I've seen at multiple places using OKRs, if anyone else has seen this and how they've kind of adjusted for it, where you have multiple levels of the organization setting OKRs. And if those OKRs don't all roll up into each other, you end up at the pod level or the team level where they feel like they're trying to support so many different OKRs that they can't really focus on the work that they need to get done. Just feel that cognitive overload. Has anyone else experienced that?
I can see it happening, but I've not seen it. The way you described it, I can definitely see that happening, because it's easy to get something wrong in so many different ways, and it's only one way to get it, or maybe 1 or 2 ways to get it right. But I've not actually seen it in practice. But as you're saying, I was like, wow, that's terrifying.
It is. I can vouch for that.
And to understand the question, David, were those key results that the teams had things they came up with themselves, or were they key results that were given to them by leadership?
That's a great question. In the cases that I'm talking about, it was that there were OKRs set that they had set as a team, but then also like the portfolio they were working on set OKRs that the work they were doing fed up into. And then maybe the engineering team had OKRs related to engineering that they also had to contribute to.
So they're kind of coming from multiple directions that they're
Yeah.
being asked to support.
So it's almost like quadrupled. Am I following that correctly? You're saying it's almost like the team sets OKRs, but the OKRs aren't laddering up to them, meaning that there's a when I first heard you say, I thought what I thought you meant was that and obviously I'm the rookie. I thought that meant that it had to be like there had to be some kind of association. Like you couldn't pick one OKR and then the team's OKR would be like completely in another, book, right? It's like trying to be in the same page. But you're saying it's in addition to what the team said?
Yeah, where I guess an example, I'll just try to be very generic with the example. Say the portfolio sets a OKR about onboarding X number of new customers. And then the team is doing OKRs around maybe delivering of the product. And then the engineering team has OKRs related to taking care of tech debt or doing some kind of back-end transformation kind of thing on their code base. And so the team ends up having to try to make sure that they're connecting into this, creating opportunities for building new customers, as well as their regular delivery stuff that they set, and then also having to pick up the engineering OKRs around up-leveling their code base.
Wow. I think that would make me want to change jobs.
Yeah. Michael, I saw you on mute, and I know you've done a lot of this, so I'd love to hear what you.
I mean, I'm just thinking it's a conversation, because it sounds like you've got a few anti-patterns there. Number one, right? Like this idea that you have tech debt objectives, and then you have business objectives, and they're not, focused or prioritized. I think that's in itself an issue. And then if the team is focused on their product OKRs, but then the portfolio has their own set of OKRs, right? That's like, they should not be out of alignment, because these, should be hopefully providing some kind of outcome. So I don't know where the disconnect is there, but yeah, it definitely seems like a conversation needs to happen to somehow get those aligned.
Yeah, and something that I've seen commonly that does lead to that, and I think this is probably the case in the times I've seen it, is where the leadership of the portfolio group doesn't set their OKRs prior to the team setting their OKR. So the team has already done theirs before the portfolio leadership published their OKRs. And so they don't know how to roll it up into what the portfolio is doing.
Oh, okay. That makes sense then. That does make sense that's how a disconnect would occur.
Yeah.
In my organization, and sometimes it becomes a bit of a timing nightmare, but we actually have to wait for the most senior level of objectives. And then when you also work on a team that is cross-functional, that meaning that there are engineers that would have engineers and say like data scientists, their respective groups could have higher level objectives, and everything sort of has to connect. And I think it goes back to a little bit about what Michael was saying. I mean, ultimately the organization has a mission, right? And so the work that we're doing has to be in support of that. So there has to be this natural connect. Obviously, I mean, you want to have a natural connectivity between all of it. And if your smaller teams set goals, but then the leadership wants to take it in a different direction, you can have a lot of, anxious people on your group.
Yeah. So I was just going to add, right? I don't think it necessarily matters that the portfolio came up with it later. They have basically declared a statement, this is the most valuable thing that we can do. And if the product owner who owns the OKRs on the team doesn't agree, like that's a conversation they need to have and say, actually, I think this is the most important thing. But yeah, if it's the most important thing, then it's the responsibility of that team to adapt. I mean, that's what we do.
Yeah. Well, it kind of goes back what you had that bullet point in the slide, right? Whereas everything can't be the most important thing to do.
I dropped a link in the chat. So Felipe Castro is a great coach on OKRs and great speaker, very passionate about this topic. And he has that article kind of on this topic of the gist of it is that you don't cascade them. You don't have to have the top level set and then the next level, then the next level, but you want to make sure they're all aligned. And it helps to have, he talks about how you have strategic OKRs at the top level, but then you can have local OKRs that can be independent or ones that are properly aligned to the strategic OKRs. So yeah, definitely take a look at that. It's not very meaty, that article, but he's got a ton of other posts on that same topic.
Thanks, Alex. Appreciate that.
Sweet.
Awesome. Right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, everybody.
Nice to see your faces.
Same
Thanks
to
again,
you.
Ademar. Appreciate you coming and speaking with us.
Thanks for having me, David.
Thanks,
And
everyone.
the
Thanks,
crew.
Ademar.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Thanks, Ed.